So we've been talking about discerning God's will, finding God's will for our lives. And I've set forth several times here that I believe that God wrote a will for our lives. He wrote His pleasure before there was anybody. And so I'd like to take a few minutes today and try to establish that scripturally. If you'd like to go to Psalm 139, beginning in verse 16. David was a prophet, and he had a revelation. I don't know how he saw this. I don't know how he caught this. But he knew, he said, "Your eyes saw my substance, being yet unformed. And in your book they all were written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there was none of them. How precious also are your thoughts toward me, O God. How great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they would be more in number than the sand. When I wake, I shall still be with. I am still with you." Psalm 139, verses 16 to 18. Let's read it out of today's Living Translation, just a little smoother. "You watched as I was being formed in utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God. They are innumerable." That's pretty clear. The word thoughts here, by the way, too, can be translated plans. So there's nothing one-dimensional about God. When we limit Him to one thing, saying it's only this way, often we miss it because He's not one-dimensional, and our lives are not one-dimensional. The plans that He has for you is not just one plan. It's innumerable. He's got so many plans for you. And there's a time when Israel was very, very discouraged. They had withdrawn from the Lord. And He confronted them through the prophet Jeremiah. And He says, "I know the plans that I have for you, plans that are good and not evil, to give you a hope into a future." Then in the next line says, "Then you will seek me, then you will pray." In other words, when we find out that He has a plan for us, it releases a desire to pray, to press in and say, "What are the plans? What do you have for us?" And God has amazing plans for you. He didn't get a brain freeze when He thought about you. He didn't write, "I can't think of anything for this guy, so I'm just going to write nothing." He's not going to write failure, failure, failure. He has a plan, and His plan is complex. In fact, the vision David had here is interesting. Just with our own imagination, with the eyes of our own heart, can you just reach down and pick up a handful of sand? Just with your mind's eye. Can you do that? Pick up a handful of sand. Now count it. Count each one. How about a bucket of sand? Would you like to count a bucket of sand? Well, when David got this revelation, it was all sand. He's out in the wilderness. Everything is sand. Your thoughts toward me are innumerable, more than the sand. He wasn't sitting in a cafe with a little bit, a handful of sand. He was in a wilderness place where he spent a lot of his time. And so he caught a glimpse that God had a plan, that God was an author. He was a map maker. One other place he said, "You've numbered my ways." And the idea with that is God's a map maker. He's keeping track of every little detail. He had a revelation that all his tears were collected and caught in a bottle. He had this awareness that God knew every little detail. He said, "You know when I sit down. You know when I stand up. You know my thoughts from afar." If your life is boring, listless, broken, cobbled up, God didn't write that. That's you. That's you doing your own thing. That's you writing your own path, charting your own course, and He'll let you. I think the worst thing isn't just not coming into His will, is that He would just let you have your will. You can do your own thing. You can map your own course. You can go your own way. You can buy into the American dream that you can do anything that you choose and just go out and choose it. You could do that. Or you can say, I know you've written something about me. I want it. I want what's in the book. I'll never be satisfied until I have what you wrote for me. I want a glimpse of it. And the idea of vision, when we talk about vision, do you have a vision? What's your vision? God gave me a vision. The idea of vision is your life that he wrote is ongoing, whether you're in it or not. It's like a track that's going on in the spirit realm. Your life is going on, what you're called to, what your purpose is, what he's destined for you. When you get a glimpse of that with the eyes of your heart, just a momentary glimpse, just a quick snapshot of something in that track that's ongoing, that's called vision. And we need vision. And so you have to pray and say, Lord, I know you have a will. I know it's in heaven. Literally, I believe if you were to die today, he would show you actual books, real books with your name written on it that he wrote about you. And you could say, Lord, I want your will that's in heaven. I want it in the earth. And that's how you get it. That's what Jesus believed. He didn't believe he just bumbled into it, stumbled into it. Automatically we're into it. You have to insist. You have to pray. You have to ask for it. Otherwise it won't happen. And this will, you were made for what he wrote. So you won't be satisfied. You won't be complete. You won't be content until you're actually doing what he destined for you. When I was a young disciple, a new Christian, just starting out, I couldn't get my head around this whole thing that how is it that you wrote a life for me? How is it that you have a plan for me, and yet somehow I can just do my own thing? I couldn't quite understand it. It seems like extreme predestination means that you're automatically in this track of doing whatever happens is his will, and whatever comes your way automatically must be the will of God because he's so big and he planned it. So I couldn't really quite get my head around it. The two Muslim taxi drivers, if they have a fender bender, they bump into each other, the very first thing that they say when they get out of the car is, Allah willed, Allah willed. And you can say, well, how could Allah will this accident? Well, because it happened. And I know lots of Christians, I hear them, they're more Muslim in their thinking than they are Christian. They just take everything that happens as God's will, and not everything. There's a devil who is the God of this world with a small g, and he can make things happen. All you have to do is look at the book of Job, and you can see that he was behind hurricanes and robbers and violence and destruction, and he was actively doing that kind of stuff. And so he is involved. Plus, people have a will. So a lot of the stuff that happens in this world, a lot of stuff that happens to us, happens because people are self-willed. The thing about God, though, is he can take anything that happens to you, even if it's the devil, even if it's yourself, your own stupidity, or someone else's stupidity. He can take all of that and somehow use it all to work together towards his purposes. And so there's a part of this where it's all fluent. You see Moses talking to God, and Moses said, I'm going to do this. And Moses said, don't do that, do this. And God says, okay, I'll do that. There's part of this whole thing that's very fluid. God's real, and so he can make adjustments in this whole thing. But not everything that happens to us is God's will. Here's how you respond if the devil is boxing your ears and he's messing with you and messing with your life. Here's how you respond. You raise both hands and you turn your face toward heaven and you say, Lord, draw me to yourself. Help me to understand you in this circumstance and help me to understand your ways, and I give myself to you. That's how you respond. If it's you and your own stupidity and something that you did, here's how you respond. You raise your hands and you tilt your face toward heaven. You say, Lord, I want to know you in this circumstance. I trust you, and I trust you to work something out with my life. If it's someone else's will that's been imposed on your will, what you do is you raise both hands and you tilt your face toward heaven. You say, Lord, I trust you. I submit myself to you. Teach me, use this circumstance. That's how you respond. If it's God who's disciplining you, you raise both hands, you tilt your face toward heaven, you say, Lord, I trust you in this. I believe you can turn this around for my good. Teach me, show me what you have for me. Your response has to be the same no matter what hits you. There's really only one response. You don't have to respond differently to each one. You have one response. We submit to God. We submit to His will. We invite Him to show us and use what's happening in our life. And a disciple, the thing about a disciple that's unique, a disciple learns from everything. A disciple takes, no matter what hits them, a real disciple says, okay, don't change anything yet. I haven't learned all I can learn from this. I want to learn. I want to grow. I want to know you. I want to experience more of you. I want to hear your voice in the midst of this. You're not just begging your way out of every difficulty. You milk it for all it's worth. You get everything you can out of it. That's how you respond. Again, when I was a young disciple, I was praying and asking, Lord, how do I understand this whole thing with your will and my will? And this is what He showed me. This is what I saw. I could picture a map of my life with places and people kind of all laid out, and a push pin with a red ribbon, and the push pin was at the beginning of the ribbon when I was conceived, and then that ribbon laid across the map, touching people and places and moving across the map. And then the day when I leave this world, there's another push pin at the end of it, and that's the life that He's destined for me. That's the life that He wrote for me before I was. Then I could picture another ribbon, a blue ribbon, with a push pin that went in the moment that I was conceived. And it ran on top of the red ribbon, making purple for a period of time. And then when I got to be where I could choose my own way and do my own thing, my blue ribbon, which was me being in charge, went all over the map. Sometimes it crossed the red line, but sometimes it ran parallel to the red line. Sometimes it went way, 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 way off into stuff and places and things that God never thought of for me. Then when I met the Lord, my blue ribbon came back and got back on that red ribbon, and I began to pray and surrender and say, Lord, I want your will for my life. I want your plan for my life. And I tasted some purple, and the purple is so peaceful and so satisfying. Even though there's hardships, even though bad things happened to me and people did things, and there was something about this, a sense of security of being in His purposes. And then there's times, even as a Christian, where I went off and it's no longer purple, it's blue again. It's back to me driving my own car, and then crossing back over that red line, and then for a little ways getting parallel, not liking it, and crying out to God and say, help me, and get back on. The next thing you know, I get a little more purple in my life. And my goal as a Christian is to try to get as much purple in my life as I can. I've tasted just enough of it that I'm never satisfied with blue. I want purple in my life. Amen?